Welcome back to Rappahannock Issues. We're here with our power panel talking about the presidential election with Drs. DJ Condit and Dr. Stephen Farnsworth, as well as co-host David Kerr. We're moving into, we've dealt with health. Now we're moving into one of the big issues that's come up in this race for president, and that's race. And that has had a lot of parameters throughout, whether it's from Mr. Trump or whether the comment about basket of deplorables. So as we enter into this part of the campaign, we'll start with Deidre. What is your thought about race in this campaign?
Well, I think we have to look very closely at how this race is dividing people by demographic identity and group. Trump is doing dismally with a group that of white voters that Mitt Romney historically did very well with, right? But he is doing deplorably with African American and Latino and Hispanic voters in the United States, right? So we have a clear divide around gender, we have a divide around race, and it's going to have a huge impact on how this election turns out. And the reason, obviously, is that there is a constituency that is aligned with Donald Trump that dances to his tunes of bigotry and dog whistling and all those things that we're talking about, in which he seems to be willing to separate people out to garner support for people who have very unpleasant and historically kind of un-American understandings about our notion of a melting pot.
David?
I really think that the Trump campaign is making a huge mistake in the way that they are running this election. America, each election cycle, is a more diverse country. If you look at this estimates for 2016, this is probably the first election in American history where less than 70% of the votes will be cast by whites. And so when you're looking at those kinds of changing demographics, the kind of racial messaging that Trump employs is counterproductive if you want to win this election. And the Republican Party, to be clear, knows this. If you look at what's called the autopsy report, the Republican Party report that came out after Mitt Romney lost in 2012, the Republican Party is very clear about this. Going forward, the Republican Party needs to focus on entrepreneurial issues, needs to focus on Latinos, needs to de-emphasize the kind of divisive issues that basically have held the party back with respect to Latino voters and African American voters in the past. Donald Trump is doing exactly the opposite of what the Republican Party said 4 years ago it needed to do to win.
Okay. David?
And what bothers me the most about this is that the, I call the long-lasting impact past this election. Let's presume Donald Trump doesn't win. Nonetheless, you have created a divide in the political discussion. You've had a major party candidate saying very hostile, vicious things about particular demographic groups, Hispanics, who's been associated with David Duke in Louisiana. David Duke is a former head of a Ku Klux Klan organization. He thinks that Donald Trump is his kind of guy. And these things are going to last past Election Day. And I'm not really that concerned about the future of the Republican Party or even the Democratic Party. It's just going to put a divide in our politics. And I find that harmful to the United States. And rather degrading, actually. I have to explain this to a lot of my friends overseas, a lot of people I work with overseas. And I'm really just doing my best to avoid the conversation right now, because I got very upset about the decision by Britain to leave the European Union, primarily a racial decision, immigrants, foreigners. Well, who am I to argue with them now when we're having an election like this?
Well, I'm not to be the voice of other, but the divisiveness isn't just on one side. I mean, the comment about the basket of deplorables. And to his credit as a marketer, Trump has turned this pretty well at his rallies, where he brings up African Americans and Hispanics and single moms who are raising kids who are professionals and saying, I have a college degree and I'm raising 2 kids and I'm deplorable to Hillary Clinton.
Which is not what she said.
But that's
right?
no. But her non-apology of "I'm sorry, I regret that I said it was 50%." But then she turned around and went back on the same note that Trump's people are racist and this.
What she said, though, Tom, was very clear. She said
there's an element of his
and
campaign.
then she said we need to talk about
Right.
the people and care about the people who are
And
economically
Kane has
underserved.
continued the
Right?
sort
I
of
just want to be clear about
yes,
that.
but to the people when they're listening to that, it's sort of a you're against us, and I mean, and to me this hurts her campaign of we're stronger together. When you sit there and you lump, and say there may be an element, I'm not doubting it, but on the other side you have different fringe groups on the left that will say harmful things, and
They're not hanging effigies.
I'm not.
That's
Right.
deplorable.
That is, but the problem is that to the other side they're being attacked, and there doesn't seem to see the equality there. That one side is evil and the other side is noble, and the people you're just lumping as all evil, they go, I'm not evil, and I'm not part of that group, and I'm not that person says I'm not a David Duke supporter. Mike Pence yesterday condemned or decried and denounced David Duke, and Wolf Blitzer, the entire interview, all he wanted him to say was, "Will you say he's deplorable?" Well, I mean, what does the word matter when the fact is he has denounced? I mean, first it was you didn't denounce David Duke, he did, and that wasn't good enough. To sort of pivot to, since we have 2 minutes left, what will happen since Kane is the nominee for vice president under Secretary Clinton? What could happen? A, was that a good choice, and B, what could happen? We'll start with you, Stephen.
Okay. One, Kane was a good choice. Virginia's a swing state. If the Democrats can nail down Virginia, and Kane should add a couple points maybe to what Clinton would otherwise have gotten, that's a smart move. If there's a vacancy, that is, if the Clinton-Kane ticket wins, then probably the governor will be looking for someone in the House to move up. Maybe that's Bobby Scott, who's been there the longest. Maybe it's Don Beyer, who represents the safest Democratic district in the House and has run statewide in the past. Or maybe it's Jerry Connolly or Mark Herring, someone else who might also be a possibility. So a lot of possibilities for the governor, but whoever it is, they're going to have to run next November, that is in 2017, in a special election, and then run again in 2018.
Right.
I think that all depends on what Terry McAuliffe wants to do for himself. If he thinks he's going into the Clinton cabinet, that takes one set of questions. If he is looking at that seat and eyeing it for himself, then he doesn't move Bobby Scott up, because you're not going to move Bobby Scott out, right? You're going to go full tilt. I think the logical choice, if that's the case, is Ann Holton. I think the history of spouses stepping in when a candidate has a sitting representative or senator has moved out is great. And I think Ann Holton would be a perfect choice if McAuliffe wants to take that seat down the road.
And for those who aren't familiar, she's the wife of Tim Kaine. She was the Secretary of Education for Virginia and has a very strong reputation on education.
Yeah, just step
Virginia. We have less than 30 seconds. Anything to add?
This is going to be one of the hottest elections in terms of potential outcome and the effect of this outcome on the future of the United States I think we've ever had. Now, you might disagree about issues of policy and what have you, but if Donald Trump's elected, I can't plot the future. And so we're going to come back in about 10 to 15 days and talk about this election just before it happens. I think there's a lot of dynamics that will occur between now and then, and so I'd encourage everybody to come back and hear what our very distinguished team has to say.
All right, we hope you come back, Rappahannock Issues. Another show on the election going in October, and then we'll wrap it up after and talk about the results. And one result is you need to come back. So come back and see us again.